reviews, I've talked a lot about, my preferences as it comes to little subgenres of entertainment. Everybody knows how much I love the Muppets, how much I love pro wrestling, Bond films, Planet of the Apes movies, things of that nature. But there's one genre that I've only touched on very, very briefly, and I believe it was in the Simple Favor review, and I was talking about how, at the end of the film, they say that Anna Kendrick's character became a private detective and she had solved all these mysteries. And I said, I'd love to see a whole film series of that, of Anna Kendrick solving groovy mysteries. I think that would just be phenomenal. I love a good mystery. I love a good old-fashioned mystery. I know it sounds weird to say when you're talking about, things that involve murder, but, something that's fun and endearing. The mystery doesn't even have to be the best, so long as the detective who's solving it is, someone fascinating and fun to be around. I think Columbo is one of the greatest characters ever created, period. And attached to that, I love female detectives, lady detectives. I think it's an interesting take on the entire genre. So, for so long, the private investigator was always a man, and every now and then you'd get these little drop-ins like, Candy Matson and Honey West and whatnot, but for the most part, it was a man's domain. So it's always fun for me when our detective is a woman. And in 2013, I believe it was, boy howdy was I blessed with a bounty, and a bounty from the land down under. So in 2013, I believe it was, that is when Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries appeared. So for those who've never seen the show, let me just give you the basis here. So an Australian show taking place in Australia in the 1920s, about Miss Fanny Fisher, who is, they didn't really say where her money comes from, but she's got money. But she's returning from being a nurse in World War I. She's got a little bit of PTSD, but it's not a huge, not like the centerpiece of the show. It's just like a character beat. And, she is a woman of the 20s. She's more outspoken. She's a little bit more loose and free. She's not too concerned with the constraints of society. She's going to do what she wants, and she's going to do it good, and she's going to have fun doing it. And she decides to become a private detective. And for the next 3 seasons, Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries are just a ton of fun. Just the most fun. Interesting stories, a lot of great colorful characters that, came along for the ride. Of course, the biggest one being Detective Inspector Jack Robinson, played by Nathan Page, who is, of course, her foil, her straight man, her sometimes love interest, So for 3 seasons, Fanny Fisher solved all these really fascinating, fun mysteries and had a good time doing it. And then the series ended for reasons. I'm not sure why they decided to end it when they did, but, whatever. And it ended kind of on a cliffhanger, as a lot of shows do, and you're like, all right, well, that's not really satisfying, but I'm glad we got the good episodes we got. And then earlier this year, before the fall of civilization, I see a trailer. I see a trailer for a film that is being released in cinemas, so I don't know if it ever made it to cinemas in Australia or England. But Miss Fisher is back in a feature-length film. And boy, I was so excited. I was so excited to see Miss Fisher back. So, we all know kind of what happened after that, and kind of what the deal is with movies and everything. So, I had to wait till Blu-ray to finally catch up and see how Miss Fisher's doing. So, the question is, how did Miss Fisher translate from a weekly 1-hour mystery to a full-length film. And I'm sorry to say, but not all that surprised given how things have gone this year, that the answer is a resounding it wasn't that great. I'm very sad to say. So let's talk about this film and try to figure out what happened here and where did this go wrong. So let's talk about the story. So it's however many years. I assume it's happening in real time, for us. So the show went off the air in 2015. So I assume it's 5 years later. They never. They give you a date, but I don't know what the date was that the last episode of the show was supposed to take place on. Miss Fisher pops up in Egypt for some reason. She's been hired to rescue a political prisoner. So she breaks this young lady out of jail. They have a merry chase. And long story short, this young lady that she's rescued from jail says that her village, when she was a young girl, it was believed that a sandstorm came through and killed everybody in the village. And she says no, that there were people who did it. Somebody came, murdered her entire village, and then the sandstorm was used to cover it up. So she asked Miss Fisher to help her solve the mystery of who these men were. So Miss Fisher goes on the journey and yada, yada, yada. Now, on the surface, this sounds like a decent setup for a feature film adaptation of a popular detective series. A bigger mystery, a more exotic location. So it sounds like a good start. So why doesn't it work? Well, first off, it's the outline sounds good, but the execution not so much. And I'm talking about the story itself. The story is nowhere near as fun, nowhere near as interesting as any of the mysteries on the show ever were. Mysteries on the show were always these murders in certain areas where Miss Fisher could go and insert herself and, kind of shake up the status quo. It's a film set where where a bunch of people are killed and she takes over as director of the show. A radio station where she fills in as a radio personality. A circus where she goes on as one of the performers. That kind of thing. So, interesting, colorful locations and situations for her and her supporting cast to interact in. And we'll talk about the supporting cast here in a second. And this mystery, they want you to feel like it's much bigger and much more elaborate. And in fact, it's just kind of duller. The locations she's in are not that fun or interesting. The characters that she interacts with are not the colorful Agatha Christie level of, suspects that you'd normally have. Matter of fact, it's fairly easy to guess, if not why they did it, who did it fairly early on, honestly. But I think the thing that really threw me is that along with the mystery, there's this, I don't know if it's the subplot or the driving plot or whatever, about the village where this young lady was living was sitting on top of an ancient tomb, the Tomb of Tears, or the Crypt of Tears of the title. And apparently these guys who massacred her village stole this huge jewel, and that of course brings a curse that if you don't return the jewel to the crypt by such and such a time, there's, the world's gonna end. And they are treating this curse 100% seriously. It's never revealed if Fanny is just kind of, playing along with it, but she is certainly behaving as if she really believes this curse. And that is so outside of what, Miss Fisher's murder mysteries would have done. It's so outside of it. I felt like I was watching Miss Fisher Nights. And anybody who gets that reference knows what I'm talking about, when a show suddenly decides out of nowhere, oh, hey, we're going to deal with supernatural shit now, and how well that tends to go over. The whole driving, inciting incident of the third act is we've got to get this jewel back to the crypt before the eclipse, so we end the curse. And they're serious. It's such a tonal shift from everything else. The characters that she interacts with are nowhere near as interesting or fun as the suspects that she's dealt with in the past. Not to mention the fact that almost her entire supporting cast from the show are completely absent. And I know that when you take a movie, or take a show to a movie, you're really walking a very thin line, because you're trying to appeal to the long-term fans, but, also to people who haven't seen the show. Luckily, Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries was not a Game of Thrones, you have to watch every episode or you're lost kind of thing. You can pretty much, it's episodic, There were a couple overarching storylines, but they were fairly self-contained in 2 or 3 episodes. So, I don't think you're as restricted as you are with other properties, with, trying to keep the internal mythology down so that new viewers can enjoy it. So, why then are all but one of her supporting characters completely absent? Actually, that's not true. They're all in it. So she had this wonderful group of supporting characters, along with Jack, the inspector. There was Hugh, the constable, who was like Jack's assistant, kind of a well-meaning, but kind of a puppy with big paws. There was Dottie, her personal assistant, a sweet girl with a little voice. She had her 2 communist cab drivers. She had her Aunt Prudence, who was kind of the monocle popper that every time she did something, like, oh, Franny, that's not what a woman should do, and only Aunt Prudence has a prominent role, aside from Jack. The rest of the supporting cast, these fun, colorful, entertaining characters that balance out Franny very well, they have one scene at the top of the movie, and they're shot from such a distance that I swear you could have just done the Wayne's World 2 thing, just hired a bunch of body doubles, dubbed the voices over, and nobody would have known. So the film suffers for that. But even in the places where this film does well, it somehow doesn't do that well. Let me give you an example. Okay, so at the core of it all, everything I've said being true, everything I've said being real, at the core of it all, you watch Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, you watch a Miss Fisher movie for Miss Fisher, for actor Elsie Davis as Miss Fisher. And maybe I'm overselling it a bit, but in my opinion, it is rare that you get an actor and a character that merge so well together. Elsie Davis is phenomenal in this role. She is captivating and enjoyable and fun and dramatic and alive and charismatic. That is the reason you watch the show, and you watch it. It's for her, for the character and for the actor playing her. Now, for the most part, even when I wasn't enjoying this movie, I enjoyed seeing Miss Fisher back and seeing Elsie Davis back in this role, and she clearly is having a fun time being back. It's not often that you get to, play a character like that, running, jumping, climbing trees, having action scenes in fabulous period costumes. And the costuming in this is phenomenal. My girlfriend would love this movie, I think, because the costuming, she loves costuming, and boy howdy, this has got some beautiful costumes. So it's fun to have the character back. But even then, there are things they've done to her that don't feel like they should be out of place, but when you look at the show and you're familiar with the character, they really are. One of the great things from my perspective, and again, white male perspective, so please understand. One of the great things about Franny as a character is she was revolutionary. She was I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to have fun doing it, and anybody who doesn't like it, fuck all y'all. She was in control of her sexuality. She did things that a woman wouldn't necessarily do. Being a private detective, first of all, but they never felt the need to get her up on a soapbox and have her preach this. It was all just there. It's a lot like the first Metroid game way back in the day when you finish the game and Samus loses the armor and you go, oh, she was a woman this whole time. And at the time, they didn't try to make a big statement. It was like, no, it's a fucking woman. Deal with it. And Miss Fisher was very much the same way. But in this movie, several times, they give her these bizarre lines about how men are terrible and, no man is going to define me. No man is going to tame me. The first time they did it, I thought it was a funny line. She's fencing with one of the suspects and she cheats to win. And he says, you clearly have no respect for the rules. And she says, that's because they're written by men. All right, funny line. Worked in that moment. But she has at least twice more where she does this. And again, it's so out of character because she was never one to preach, boo men or I'm going to fight the patriarchy. It was just, I am what I am and you all need to adapt to me. I don't need to adapt to you. You need to adapt to me and I don't need to lecture you about it. So even then, it feels like the characters are out of touch with each other, and it's a little jarring. I'm coming down hard on this movie because it is flat, it's dull. That's another thing before I move on. I believe from the commercial I saw and the trailer I saw that this was released in theaters. I don't know now, having seen it, if this was actually a big budget movie. Keeping in mind that I'm sure Australia's version of a big budget movie is a little different than ours. Or if this was a made for TV kind of deal. Because it looks more expensive than your average TV episode, but cheaper than your average movie. It's weird. Visually, it's very weird. So, again, let's back up to what I was saying before I remembered that. So I'm coming down hard on this movie, and I'm making it sound like I really hated it. I'm disappointed in it, but I don't hate it. So why don't I hate it? Well, a couple things. Number one, as I mentioned, the costumes. The costumes were always fantastic on the show, but here you can tell with the bigger budget, more time, they are really, really going for it. And man, certain people look like they belong in other time periods, and Elsie Davis looks like a lady of the 20s, and she can pull off the look. She looks fabulous. The costumes are outstanding. Like I say, my girlfriend would love this movie. And the other thing that saves it, first of all, it's great to have Miss Fisher back, but more than that, it is great to have Miss Fisher and Jack back together. I mentioned at the beginning, or a little while ago, that it's rare to see a character and an actor merge together so well as Elsie Davis does with Miss Fisher. But you can also tell when you have two actors that have just superb chemistry together. Their characters, their actors just work so well together. And Elsie Davis and Nathan Page as Franny and Jack, they remind me of a classic Hollywood golden age couple. You know, they work so well together, and these characters work so well with each other that even at the lowest points, having the two of them together again and quipping off each other and playing off each other, and playing not just the moonstruck, you know, oh, I'm going to she's going to antagonize him and he's going to have the straight face because he's the stick in the mud, but playing the little emotions, the pain, the anger, the desire for one another. It's wonderful. It is so, and it's so effortless. So effortless. I mentioned this with the Bill and Ted review, is that it felt like everybody was just trying so hard, but here the two of them just slip right back into their roles like a pair of comfy shoes, you know? And that's wonderful to watch as an audience and as a fan of the show. I just wish the movie surrounding that was better. At the end of this one, they tease the possibility of a second. I'm up for that, but I think if you're going to do these, you need to get her out of this. I don't know. They're very obsessed with her being in Egypt and Jerusalem and all this for some reason, and I'm not sure why. It's like, get her to England, get her to America. You know, in the 20s, get her some. You know, she needs these, you know, more interesting confined locations to work. So it's wonderful seeing Franny again, but unfortunately, it's also just a touch disappointing. So final grade for Miss Fisher and the Crypt of Tears. Much in the theme of this year, I gotta go a C. So solid C for this one. For the few movies I've seen this year, we're generating more C's than a Spanish couple rooting for Daniel Bryan. But, you know, it's not a complete waste. If you're a fan of the show, it'll be nice to revisit the characters, but you might be better off just going back and rewatching the series. So, all right. We're heading into the home stretch of the year. I know some people think that means that everything bad is just going to end when the new year strikes, but, you know, I'm not quite that optimistic. But things are reopening. A bunch of movie theaters around here are reopening. New movies are starting to play again. I don't know how I feel about that. And I don't know how I feel about being in that large of a public space. So I don't know when I'm going to go back to the movies, when I'm going to feel brave enough to chance it. But I will still endeavor to bring you all the reviews I'm capable of, and Forgotten Gems and Series of Series and whatever else can come to my head. So yeah, we're living in uncertain times, but I'm sure it's comforting to know drive home reviews is a constant. So until next time, as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.